This is Griff Ruby with part 6 of my series, Ecclesiology for Sedevacantists, based on Dogmatic Theology, Volume 2, Christ's Church, by Msgr G. Van Noort. We have a little bit more here on Catholicity, and then I want to discuss something about that. A couple things. One final paragraph, page 148. Please note, however, that the continuity of this progressive expansion should not be pressed too hard. The texts cited do not rule out the possibility of the churches being notably decreased in this or that century, or country, or area, or whatever, region, of the churches being notably decreased in that area due to schism or heresy, whose occurrence was foretold in sacred scripture. Like we lost a lot of Europe to Protestantism, we lost Africa to, Islam, things like that. But we still have, an existence in Africa and in Europe and so forth. So that's the key thing. We continue. Still, theologians usually reject the hypothesis that the church might ever be so besieged with heresy that it would, even for a brief period, be restricted to just one region. Neither should one interpret the scriptural prophecies about the great defection at the end of the world in such a sense. There's so much right here in that one last paragraph. It's talking about what could happen at the end of the world. We don't know whether what we've got now is the end of the world or not. It could be. Or it could be a dry run for the same thing, from which a great many precedents useful for when the real thing happens can be drawn. Because that could be a very legitimate case. But here's the thing here. Now that today the church is this tiny remnant, less than 100th the size of what the church was on the eve of Vatican II. But what I find interesting is we're not confined here or there. And I have a rather fascinating example of that. About a year or so ago, a certain priest in Germany was being attacked through the courts of Germany because he was a faithful priest, and they wanted to get the courts to claim that he wasn't a priest and shouldn't be so recognized. And for a while there were hearings and this and that. There was also a petition put out on there. And what I find rather interesting was his responses. And I'm going to take a look at that here. I'm going to bring this up. And I'm sorry I can't share it with the people watching this thing, but you're just going to have to kind of listen to what I'm saying as I'm citing, there are responses. They said, how can you do this? There are responses from an extraordinary range of nations. And I find this absolutely interesting. The first response, of course, was from Germany, probably somebody who knew him. The second, well, I saw this and I felt I needed to respond too. But a number of other people started responding. And let me just cite some of the places these have come from here. A number of different states in the United States, a few provinces of Canada. Let's see, we had one in Greece and Hungary, another from Germany, Portugal, Argentina, Poland, Ecuador, several from India, New Zealand, another from Poland, Mexico, another from Argentina, Romania, let's see here, South Africa, Brazil, the Russian Federation, United Kingdom, let's see here, Philippines, Japan, another from the Russian Federation, Netherlands, another from India, Sweden. All that, and interestingly enough, in a mere 75 postings. All those countries represented. I find that fascinating. You see, we're in parts of the world I haven't even known anything about, whose story doesn't receive even a word of mention in my book, just, because I don't know about it. But we're there. We're in South Africa. We're in Japan. We're in India. We're in Sweden. I mean, I've had correspondence also in different parts of the world. I've had correspondence in Islamic parts of the world, in Norway, in just different places, Malaysia, Indonesia. I mean, the thing is, the traditional faith It exists. There may not be clerics. There may not, some of these countries, I think, may well lack, even may not have so much as a single Catholic cleric, but there are still Catholic laity. And they're doing just like what the Japanese did. You know, that's all they can do. They make do. But obviously one day the clerics must come. We need to train more clerics. We need to do that. Now there's another thing to be derived from this, though. There's another important fact. It can't be confined to one region. That also means that you can't have that the church, in an institutional sense, only exists in the person of some bishop in some, say, some gulag or desert island or whatever, to which all the rest of us have no access. How many times have you heard that claim? Well, maybe there's some real bishop, you know, bishop in the woods or Bishop X or whatever, who was appointed by Pope Pius XII, and he's still there with some flock in some, you know, utterly forgotten corner of the world that everyone has somehow managed to overlook. And that would be tantamount to saying that that's the only place the church exists. And I find it interesting that that is exactly what has been explicitly described as being impossible here. It could never be restricted to just one region. Neither could one interpret, even they say, well, but maybe this is the end of the world. I find it interesting. You cannot even interpret the scriptural prophecies about the great defection at the end of the world in such a sense. So even if this time is the end of the world coming, this is still not the case. For the church to be extant everywhere, it has to be there governmentally. Therefore, there have to be legitimate bishops available in different parts of the world, even if there might not be within one's own country. There would still be someone to whom they could, in some sense, have access, even if they had to travel or make some great pilgrimage or whatever. It has to exist. So that's a very important finding. And that, of course, shows the Catholicity of the faith, traditional Catholicism. We're everywhere, and we're not just in one place. And when somebody tries to claim otherwise, they're actually denying this particular property of Catholicity. We're everywhere, and that means our clergy, at least the authority and the access to their authority, is everywhere. They are discoverable, they are knowable, and we will be talking about that in the next section where we introduce the Church's apostolicity. Thank you.